Without objection, it will be done.
Thank you.
Ms. Escobar for 5 minutes.
Chairman Cohen, thank you so much for holding this hearing, especially on this very important anniversary. And thanks to all of our panelists for being here. I'm very grateful for your testimony. Although I will say I am shocked to hear the opinion that Texas has done the right thing when it comes to its voter suppression efforts, because we all know that the consequences to voter suppression completely change the outcome of elections and change the public's ability to have true representation in public office. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to please enter into the record an article about my governor who is reportedly, emails show he is behind the effort to purge the voter rolls in Texas, an effort that many of us saw as a surreptitious way to change the outcome of elections and to try to circumvent the changing demographics in our state.
That objection will be done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Abrams, you and I share the fact that we both come from a state that states, Texas and Georgia, that were previously covered under the preclearance formula. In your testimony, you illustrate the challenges Georgia faces in a post-Shelby world, and I see so many parallels between our two states. Given the example that I just cited, can you please expand on the voter roll purges in Georgia? What are some of the key lessons that you learned that you can share with us through your work with the New Georgia Project and Fair Fight Action? What can Texas learn from Georgia?
I'm going to decline to answer that question, but I will answer the larger question. I would say, first of all, during the tenure of Secretary of State Brian Kemp, 1.4 million voters were purged. In a single day in 2017, 500,000 voters were taken off the roll, a reduction of the Georgia rolls by 8%. Now, to the credit of the state, we have a version of automatic registration which has added about 681,000 voters to the rolls simply by signing up for their driver's license. The challenge is that a number of those people who are availing themselves of that were unlawfully purged during the 1.4 million person purge. The challenge is that in Georgia, we face not only malfeasance, but incompetence. There are people being removed from the rolls who should not be removed. There is no condition for their removal, but we have been able to demonstrate that the communication from the Secretary of State's office has been inadequate to the task. There has been a constant attempt to defer responsibility to the localities to say that it was the county's fault for not doing so. But the reality is the Secretary of State is the election superintendent. That is the person in charge. The buck stops with that person. And the challenge with the way voter purging happens is that no one is responsible, but voters are losing their rights. In the state of Georgia, there has been an argument that because we had the highest turnout record in Georgia for voter turnout in 2018, there could not have been voter suppression. I would argue that that's the moral equivalent of saying that because more people get in the water, there can't be sharks. The reality is that voter suppression is adapting to the changing demographics of our country, and the reality is that voter purging is one of the tools used. It may be an imperfect tool because people will continue to seek their rights. They believe that they have the right to vote. I grew up with parents who instilled in me a respect for that right. And there are those who will aggressively and assiduously pursue it. But there are so many others who, when rejected by their state, when rejected by their government, they turn away and they do not return. And that is what is so pernicious about voter suppression, that we have people who believe now that they have no voice because of error, because of intentionality, and because of racial discrimination. And those are challenges that not only affect Georgia, but they affect the rest of the country. One thing I will say is that I do believe that one of the opportunities we have here is to expand the coverage of Section 5. I do believe that there is a broader need for Section 5 to not simply be afforded or to provide coverage to those states that have a history of bad action, because the reality is more states have joined the party. More states have decided that because they cannot win elections fairly if there's full participation, then the goal is to limit who can participate. And that is a fundamental flaw in the process. And it is dangerous to our democracy, and we have to recognize that voter suppression, while it may target voters of color, it will affect us all.
Thank you, Ms. Abrams. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you so much for your courage. Ms. Jackson Lee is recognized for 5 minutes.
Let me thank the